What's up, guys? The Pickleheads are back for another week, here to help your game get better. Today, we're going to talk about 3 ways to recognize an Erne opportunity. A lot of people talk about the Erne and they talk about how to do it, but they don't necessarily explain when to do it or when to look for that opportunity. So today, we're going to give you 3 great ones. Stick around for the last one because it's only known to, I would say, more advanced players. Also, we'll talk a little bit about overdoing it. Anyway, let's jump right into number 1, Os. First Erne opportunity to recognize, I think, is when you're dinking directly across from your opponent. So you're dinking back and forth. And what you want to look for this first opportunity to Erne is for your opponent to look down. And put them in a position to where it's difficult for them to dink cross court. Or say they are dinking cross court with your partner, they're dinking back and forth. You finally get a ball. You, whether it comes to you or your partner, you try to put it in the corner of the person directly across from you so that they have to look down to get the ball. If you can use some topspin or a little bit of speed on that dink, that can also have them look down. And so it makes it very difficult for them to dink back cross court. So most likely they're going to dink to you. And when they're looking down, and if that ball is coming with a little bit of speed or a little bit of topspin, that ball might pop up for you. So if you see them look down, then's the time to jump. If you're not as advanced and you're not able to do a jumping Erne, that's fine. You can technically run through the kitchen, but you just have to establish outside of the kitchen on the sideline with both feet before you make contact with the ball. You can also jump the kitchen early and then wait on the side as you see that they're looking down and hope for an Erne opportunity that way. So the first opportunity to look for is when your opponent's looking down, and the best way to get them to do that, for those that are straight up and down in front of you, is to kind of put the ball in the corner of the kitchen. If you're on the left side, then you want to put it in the right corner of your opponent's kitchen. If you're on the right side, you want to put it, same thing, still in the right corner. But I'm thinking for left-handers and for right-handers. A lot of times we say, if you're playing right side, if you're playing left side, regardless, if you're playing straight up with somebody, a great opportunity there would be to put it down and away, or on their, if you're straight up with them on your right side. How do I explain that, Os? If you're straight up with them on your right side, you want to put it in their left corner of their kitchen. If you're straight up and down with them on your left side, you want to put it on their right corner of their kitchen. Does that make sense?
No. I'm trying to think of it in my mind, but I'm sure if I saw what you were saying, I would understand it. But essentially, all it comes down to, rather than thinking left and right, is you're hitting it behind your opponents.
Yes.
So you're hitting it behind them so that they then have to turn and look down. And a rule of thumb that I use is if I can see the back side of my opponent's shoulder, then I'm going to go. So if I can kind of see their back, essentially, and I've hit the ball behind them, I'm jumping the kitchen, ready for the Erne. And I actually got a comment on a video the other day of I attempted an Erne, but the guy ended up putting it back up the middle. And they were like, this is super low-level play. The dude attempted an Erne, and he stepped through the kitchen in his attempt to Erne. I'm like, yeah, that's actually high. That's exactly what all the pros do. They attempt to Erne because you're trying to apply pressure, and a lot of the time you have to bail out. So why waste the time of staying out of the kitchen? Because you're not the one that's going to be hitting the next shot out of the air. If they do hit it up the middle, your partner's going to come over and cover it. So it's just like you're stepping into the kitchen to establish as quickly as possible and then reestablish outside of the kitchen as quickly as possible. But yeah, it essentially comes down to, it's just a funny comment, but it essentially comes down to that. You're hitting it behind your opponent. You see that they're looking down, like Spencer's saying, or another sign is you can see their back, and more specifically the back of their shoulder. Just send it. And if you're wrong, at least you tried and you applied some pressure. A lot of the time you'll get an error just from them seeing you jump over the sideline.
Yeah, that's a great point. It can just apply pressure even if you don't make contact with the ball, even if you don't Erne at all. Keep in mind, this is for beginners and intermediate players. If you cross the plane of the net, you or your paddle, if you cross the plane of the net without making contact with the ball, that's a fault, and it's the other team's point. So when you do attempt an Erne, make sure that you're not crossing that plane of the net in your effort to hit the Erne. Because if you don't make any contact with the ball, then you lose the point. But if you do make contact with the ball, you can cross the plane of the net, and you're fine. Just go get back in position.
So I learned this rule, within the first 3 or 4 weeks of playing. I thought it was the stupidest thing ever. I still do. But there has to be some reason behind it, and maybe it's not stupid. So if you guys know, comment on wherever you're listening or watching. Comment and let me know, because I'm very interested to see, like, what's the purpose for it? Are you possibly going to get in the way of your opponent by crossing the plane? What is it? Do you know, Spencer?
That's my guess, too. To be honest, I've never looked it up. I guess I need to be more curious, but I think that's it. I think he can't be like, if I was to go cross the plane of the net and tickle my opponent under the armpit while my partner is dinking with them, then yeah. So I think it's that. But I don't know for sure. Yeah, if you guys know, let us know. I do want to make it clear one more time. So whether you're dinking straight up with the person in front of you, or your partner is dinking diagonally to the person in front of you, it doesn't matter which side you're on, to the person in front of you. If you can get it towards the sideline, towards the corner of the kitchen, or just behind the corner of the kitchen, and more specifically, like you said, Oz, you nailed it, behind them, they have to bend over. If you're watching on video, they have to bend down to look at that. And so they're not, lots of times they're not even seeing that you're going to Erne that ball. But the other thing is, if I'm bending down in that situation, and like you said, like my side is turned towards the court, it's going to be very hard for me to dink it all the way back across court.
Yeah.
I just have to get it in. And so the easiest way I can think in that position to get it in is to dink it straight back across from me. And that dink from that position is probably not going to be the perfect dink. If it's popped up just a little bit, then boom, that's the Erne opportunity for us. So that's one to look for.
Love it, because you're go ahead. You can bail out of Ernie's anytime. So you might as well apply the pressure. But I think what Spencer mentioned earlier is we're going to talk about, you can definitely overdo it. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the very end. It can definitely be overdone. You got to find that happy medium. Let's go on to number 2, Os. So a second Erne opportunity. Again, a lot of people show videos of the Erne. They show, hey, this is how you hit an Erne. They say, oh, look how cool this guy's Erne was. Look how much power that had, blah, blah, blah. But what we're looking for as players is, okay, how do I recognize when I have the opportunity to Erne, right? And so these for me are my top 3, and there's others out there too. So that was the first one. But number 2, the second way to recognize an Erne, you're dinking cross court with your opponent. Okay, we're dinking back and forth. If you can get a decent ball to dink middle, lots of times, and I would say almost always, so we'll call it the inside foot of your opponent. If you dink towards the inside foot of your opponent, if they cross the tee, or if they're making their way towards their partner's side to get the ball and give you a dink back, 9 times out of 10, they are going to dink cross court back to you. They're not going to hook their wrist. I'll get a paddle for this. They're most likely not going to. So I'm reaching to my right. I don't know how much of this can be seen. If you guys do have access to YouTube, I would definitely suggest watching this, because once I learned this second way to recognize Ernes, there were so many more opportunities available to hit the Erne. So this one is, okay, I'm dinking cross court with my partner. Okay, and so I'm kind of pointing on the camera. We're dinking cross court, back and forth. This is my backhand dinking back and forth. I start to put balls right in the center of the kitchen, or if anything, slightly towards their partner. So not quite cross court. That's still going to be the cross court person's forehand in most cases. And they're going to want to dink that back to you instead of cocking their wrist back and going oppositely to your opponent. I know that you can't see me right now, Austin, either. I want to know if this is making sense if someone doesn't have access to the video.
Yeah, if they don't have access to the video, they don't know what's going on. And it might be because last night my son, I say my son, obviously Spencer knows the name of my son, but he was up from 12:30 a.m. until 4:09 a.m. And we were just having a party, all of us together, you know? And so I don't know if I'm not quite all the way there mentally, I think.
Okay.
To grasp this without actually seeing you.
Have you seen that episode of The Office where someone's explaining something to Michael and like he doesn't get it at all? And he goes something like, I might butcher this a little bit, but he goes like, okay, explain it to me like I'm an 8-year-old. And so the guy's explaining it, and he goes, explain it to me like I'm 6.
Like lower it down a little bit more. I think that's what I'm needing today.
So without the video, it's kind of tough. But I'm going to attempt again. This is a second opportunity to Erne, and it's a great one, but a lot of people don't know this one and don't recognize this one. It is more advanced. But you're dinking, I'll keep it as simple as possible. You're dinking cross court with your opponent. Instead of dinking to their outside foot, dink somewhat towards their inside foot so they have to reach with their forehand to get it. That is a very difficult dink for them to hit to their partners straight up, straight across the net. Instead, it's much easier for them to dink it right back to you. Inside so you know out. For sure when you do that, when you're crossing that tee, when they're crossing the tee, when they're making their way towards you, they're 9 times out of 10 going to dink towards you. So keep hitting that spot and wait for one of their dinks just to be a little bit high. Okay. I've just noticed as soon as they cross that tee right there, for some reason, that's the spot where you know they're not dinking to their partner because that's an extremely difficult dink. It's coming back to you. It might not be a pop-up every time, but like you said, be ready to go for that Erne opportunity. If it's popped up, then you can put it away. If it's not popped up, then you're right back in position and you can dink the ball back. You have time.
Right.
So that's one. It is more advanced. It is a little bit harder to hit it from that angle because we're so used to hitting a ball that comes directly
you're right back.
At us.
The Peloton just started on its own.
Well, I'm gonna continue here. So it's so much easier to dink straight up with somebody than it is to completely go the opposite way. So that one is a great opportunity to Erne. Look for it when you're playing with someone. I would suggest drilling it with somebody as well, dinking more middle with them and just waiting for that pop-up so you can time your jump. A lot of the Erne has to do with timing. And if you can time it properly, man, that number 2 can be a great opportunity.
Oh, yeah. That's a sweet opportunity. I feel like that's one that I've had maybe a couple of Ernies where I've actually gone.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just come down to I haven't really thought about it much, but I think that this gives me a better idea to use it more just because I haven't thought about it much. But literally nothing feels better than that Erne. There's one other Erne that feels better, but that one feels really, really good. Just recognizing it because they have to go inside out. If they go inside in, it's like you were saying, a more difficult shot. I guess that would be inside in. I know that they're in the middle of the court, but essentially they're going back cross court / inside in. Right. They'll hit a lot of balls into the net. The margin for error there isn't great, so they're probably going to put it back up the middle or cross, and chances are you can Erne that ball. Only problem with this one, it's like if you do Ernie and they end up going up the middle, now you and your partner are way out of position.
Right.
So you gotta. It's
Put it
really
away.
after you see them actually go cross court, you're jumping because you have that time since they're going inside out.
So I actually learned this fairly recently also, and that's why I've been able to have more Ernie opportunities. But there's two things I look for this Ernie opportunity number 2. One is for them reaching, or in other words, just crossing over, kind of into their partner's side of the court. If I can see them reaching or coming over towards their side of the court,
Right.
I know it's going to be an extremely difficult dink for them to dink all the way back over to my partner. So
Got
that's
it.
one thing that I'm looking for. The second thing that I'm looking for with them is if they're off balance when they're doing it. A lot of times it is just a reach and they're not taking the extra step to get to it. And so that's when we can salivate a little bit. And if they're reaching for the ball, they're not going to have as much control because they don't have the balance that they need. So those are the two things that I've been looking for. It has helped me recognize it more often. Again, it doesn't happen every time, but when it does, it's pretty great.
Yeah, that's a nasty one.
All right, let's talk about Ernie opportunity number 3. Another way to recognize an Ernie. I learned this one a while back, but it was super fun when I learned it. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. What's cool about this one is I can either backhand Ernie. So let's say I'm right-handed, I am, and I'm playing on the left side of the court. We're going to look for the Ernie opportunity number 3, the drop from our opponent. If they decide that they don't want to drop middle and they want to drop to the sides, their drop better be pretty great. Otherwise, we have the opportunity to Ernie it. So if any of their drops are slightly high or lofty and they're dropping to one side of the net or the other, both of us have the opportunity to Ernie that ball. Yeah. And so we can take that ball and go, they're back at the baseline, mind you, because they're dropping. So we could take that ball and hard angle it across court in the kitchen and make it very difficult for them to get to. Or we can still smack it with a forehand, but just pummel the ball as hard as we can and make their next shot really difficult.
Yeah.
So that one for me has always been a fun one to look for. It's probably my favorite type of Ernie, but just keep an eye out for your opponents. If they're dropping out to the outside edges of the net, it's a great time to be able to put that ball away with an Ernie.
Yeah, the thing that's frustrating is the higher level that you get, you really just don't get those opportunities anymore when at least you're playing at that level. But you can always, play down in rec games and stuff, but you really just don't see those fun opportunities as much anymore because people are their mind is so in it that they're always making the right decision. Right. Which it's never a good idea to drop down the line or towards the edges unless you have, unless you're leaving yourself 3-4 feet from the edge, because then they can't Ernie it anyway. Or if you're going super low, stuff like that. But yeah, it's not seen as much at higher levels, obviously, as you know. But a part of this Ernie is it's actually on the third shot drop. I will set this up, and this is the only time that I hit my drops out wide, or at least I try to, because it's usually a mistake if I end up hitting it out wide and then it gets Ernied. But I serve, they return, they're still coming into the net, and I drop it to the player that's running into the net, and I drop it way out wide into the corner of the kitchen, and then I full on sprint and jump the line fully committed. Yeah. A lot of the time, they'll just plop that ball right up the line to you. And actually, in fact, today in our, I played this morning at 7 a.m. as well. So that was insane because I had to get up at 6:30 after sleeping for like 3 hours last night. And I played insane, by the way. I lost the first game. I think I was asleep. And then after that, never lost. And nice. I didn't miss a dink all day. Everything was good. Anyways, I digress. So what you're essentially doing is you're dropping out wide as they're transitioning forward. Make sure you're hitting this to the player that is transitioning forward after they have returned. Don't
Yeah,
drop it
not
to
the
the
one
other
that's
player.
already at the net.
Yeah, they're already established there, so it's super easy for them to Erne. Then you go and jump the line, smack an Erne. And this happened this morning, but I did the drop, and my partner recognized it, and he did a Burt all the way across the kitchen. It was sick.
Oh,
Straight
nice.
up put away. So for those of you that don't know what a Burt is, it's essentially an Erne. An Erne is where you jump over your corner. A Burt is where you jump over your partner's corner of the court. So he cut onto my side and Burted, and yeah, it was sweet. But that's my favorite Erne of all time, is right on that third shot dropping it to the player that's transitioning forward.
Yeah, that one's a really fun one. Yeah, and you talk about too, like when you start playing at advanced levels, it's hard to get as many Erne opportunities.
Yeah.
But these are at least ways that you can set them up and be looking for them. But yeah, you won't see them as often as advanced levels. You also won't see them as often if you play with the same group of people consistently, because they know, I mean, immediately, even just playing with somebody one time, they're like, okay, I know this guy is looking for the Erne, so I'm just never going to give him that opportunity. I'm always going to go cross court or whatever. So not just at advanced levels, also with people that you play with often. So I would definitely suggest, yes, drilling, but I would suggest playing with different people, with different play styles. Then that's a great way to keep practicing these things so that they don't, and getting better at them so they don't go away. Whereas if you play with the same people, like playing with my wife, for example, she knows that I'm looking for the Erne right there, so she will almost never hit it there unless I'm like out of position or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
She can read it. So
she's got you down. Another quick little bonus one. This is the way that I recognize Ernie's the most, actually, is based off of the paddle angle of my opponent. So if I can see that their paddle angle is faced towards the line, I'm jumping, and it's going to go up the line unless they're trying to just seduce me into an Erne, which can happen a lot at higher levels. But you'll see anywhere from, novice, beginner, all the way to 4.0-ish area. Mm-hmm. You'll get players where it's if you just watch their paddle face rather than watching the actual ball, watch the player, watch their paddle face, you'll see that they'll project what they're going to do before they do it. So you just watch their paddle face. If it's facing up the line, jump, and you'll get lots of Erne opportunities, and then they'll be stuck there thinking, like, how is this guy or girl reading my mind right now? I don't understand it. And I remember this happened to me a lot right when I first started playing, and it was super frustrating just getting Ernie'd on. But the main thing that you can do to prevent Ernie's is hit all of your dinks cross court, or at least the vast majority of them, and only go up the line every once in a while. But make sure to focus on the fact that make sure to focus on not projecting where you're going to go. You'll get that a lot at kind of, amateur levels. You'll get that a lot where they actually project where they're going to go. But I like to hit majority of my dinks cross court, and what you'll see at the pro level, Colin Johns is a great example. I've never seen Colin hit a dink up the line. Well, I have, obviously. But for the most part, I've only seen him dink cross court, and if he does ever go up the line, it's because his opponents are out of position, and they couldn't possibly Erne the ball anyway. But I'm telling you, 99% of his balls are cross court or up the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a great point. I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever looked at the paddle angle of my opponent. I think I'm just not smart enough to do that, but I'm going to try, and I'll encourage everyone else to try with me. I'm going to start looking for that. Lots of times, I grew up playing, Austin and I are 10 years apart. I actually grew up playing baseball. I don't think Austin played much, if any, baseball. But I've always been taught, keep your eye on the ball in the sports that I played. I played a decent amount of basketball too. Requires a lot of hand-eye coordination. But I'm, just thinking about, like, as a batter, I was coached to always just look at the ball, look at the ball, look at the ball. And that's a great thing. I like to watch the ball hit my paddle too. But I think I need to watch the ball hit my opponent's paddle so you can kind of see what direction it's going to go. So I'm going to try it out.
Yeah.
See if that one helps me too.
It's kind of interesting because J.W. Johnson, if you watch him, and especially if you watch him in slow-mo, which Who'd have known we could have made watching pickleball more boring, right? But if you watch him in slow-mo, his head rarely moves. And his body is very still for the most part, but you'll see he's focused in on his opponents and obviously the ball as well. But he's not like hyper focused on his partner when his partner's hitting the ball. He's really just focused on his opponents for the most part. And he has the fastest hands in all of pickleball, so he's doing something right there. But just like keeping still and focusing more on your opponents, what they're doing, their paddle angles, their strokes, their load up, stuff like that, that'll really help you to know where the ball is going to go before it actually goes there, whether it's an Erne or whether it's a speed up, whatever.
Yeah, that's a great tip too. And you can always have more control as well by being still. And that doesn't mean be a robot. It doesn't mean not move your feet, but being as still as you can has a lot of benefits. I think of like Olympic sprinters. Have you watched any of their videos in slow-mo?
No.
If you're watching like an Olympic sprinter from face on and you're watching them sprint, you know, they're the fastest in the world, or the can't think of the name of it. What's the name of the one where they actually jump the things while they're running?
Hurdles.
And their head will stay. See, you're not too tired. You can answer that. Their head will stay in the same position. It's like a close-up of their upper body. Their head is like perfectly still, yet they're sprinting and jumping. You know what I mean? So they're like locked in. And I think that's really similar in pickleball. The more still you can be, doesn't mean don't move, because obviously they're moving fast as hell. But
yeah,
it just means be more controlled. Anytime I'm more still and more controlled, I'm a lot more consistent and I'm a lot more successful on the court. Also, I think it's go ahead.
Sorry. This is totally random, but I have to share this tip with you guys because it's absolutely changed my dinking game. Even as a 5.5, semi-pro player, this tip has absolutely changed my dinking game, and it came from a guy named Pickleball Tyler, something like that, on Instagram. He has a great page. I just happened upon the tip. I was searching for I can't think of the word. I'm too tired, but I was searching for inspiration. There it is. I was searching for inspiration, and I saw this video of him, and he said when he dinks, he points at the end of his dink. He's pointing the tip of his paddle / the outside edge of his paddle towards where he wants to go. And that is a game changer. It's insane how much more consistent my dink just became by doing that this morning. Even when I was, half dead on the court, I literally didn't miss a dink this morning. And I was thinking about that and like pointing where I want to go. And wow, does it work? I also hit 99.99% of my dinks cross court. I don't think I maybe hit two dinks all day up the line. So
yeah,
there you guys go with that. Is just to add on to what we talked about earlier. It has nothing to do with the Erne, but it'll help you guys to avoid being Ernied, dinking cross court, and then making sure that the tip of your paddle is facing towards your opponents. So shout out to that guy. Never met him before, but that's an awesome tip. And I feel like no matter what level you're on, you can always grow, always learn new things. And yeah. And another thing was like how Spencer said he's never heard of the angle of the paddle projecting an Erne. That was something that I was fortunate to learn right in the beginning by a guy named Eric Gubler, who's super, super good player. And he's like, yeah, you just watch their paddle face. And it's just these things that you learn as you go. If you're always willing to learn, you'll always improve. So just be willing.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, last point here. Let's talk about over-earning or overdoing it. It can definitely happen. I have a quick little story. So I was playing with a partner of mine a while back. We're playing in a match, and I love to Erne. Like, who doesn't love to do that? Like, it feels so good, But I was definitely going way too much, and I was leaving my partner to cover basically the whole court, because I would leave the court to Erne. I would jump. I would run out there and be ready for an Ernie at anything that I thought was even remotely a chance to Ernie. But it was causing him to cover so much court and making it really difficult for him. And I didn't realize that he was getting frustrated. And so he didn't slowly start telling me. It was just after a while his frustration hit its peak. He's like, he goes, "What are you doing?" He's like, "We don't need to Ernie these guys to win. Please don't Ernie again this game." And I was like,
who is this?
Henry. And I was
That's hilarious.
Like you could tell he let it get to him for so long that finally it was just enough for him, And I wasn't paying attention to him because all I'm thinking in my mind is, "Ooh, I'm going to go Ernie." Ooh, hey. He's covering so much court and we were getting burned. And he's like, "We don't even have to Ernie to beat these guys." And so we played the rest of that game and the rest of that match. I didn't go for an Ernie, and we ended up winning pretty handily. But you could definitely overdo it. If you're not looking for specific opportunities and you don't recognize specific things, try not to Ernie too much because you're leaving your partner high and dry. I guess that's the point we wanted to make there.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better.
All right. Well, those are the 3 plus a few bonus tips, ways to recognize an Ernie. Challenge you guys to go and look for these specific opportunities. Like I said, there's lots of videos that show us, maybe how to Ernie or, what's the technique or, you got to be fit to jump this far to Ernie, blah, blah, blah. But nobody really talks about what to look for so that you actually can Ernie. So another challenge for you guys is try to find another video that's actually teaching this specific thing. So I'm going to toot our own horn right there. Picklehead's got you covered this week. Get out there, practice it, better your game. If you have any additional questions about the Ernie, Austin and I are always happy to answer them. You can message us on YouTube if you're watching on there. You can always message us on Apple or on Spotify, wherever you're watching or listening. But we appreciate everybody's support. Thanks for hanging with us this time. Aus, you got anything else?
No, I'm going to sleep. I'm excited to be done with this podcast today.
All right, later, Pickleheads.
Later.